All right, let's see. We've got some participants coming in. We'll give everybody a few minutes. I see everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're very excited to have you all today. Give you a few more seconds. Okay. Looks like we have quite a few coming in, but we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our session today. We are very excited. Sorry, I'm having difficulties with my PowerPoint. All right, it looks like we have quite a few people. Thank you for joining us. Welcome everyone to our session today. My name is Jessica Kilman, and I'm the Director of Client Services with Sterling Martin Associates. This is our April session. Welcome. We are very excited to share with you. The title of our session today is DEI, Why It Should Remain at the Forefront for Association Executives. Just a few housekeeping items to go over with you. Today, we have turned off all of your cameras and muted your audio by default. However, we do have the Q&A session open. The chat session has been shut down, but we do welcome all of your questions during this session. We look forward to hopefully getting to all of your questions during this 1 hour session. However, if we do not get to your question, please feel free to contact one of the panelists or all of the panelists at the end of the session with your question, and they would be happy to get back to you. And at the end of this slide, the final slide, we do have their contact information, so please feel free to use that. I will go ahead and turn this over to Damaris Albino with Sterling Martin Associates to go over the agenda for today's session.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jessica, and welcome to everyone to our April Executive Excellence webinar. I'm a Vice President with Sterling Martin Associates, and I bring over 30 decades of professional human resources expertise, with 15 of those years leading the HR functions spanning across a variety of sectors, including for-profit finance, healthcare, and nonprofit professional service association to this very important discussion today. As a former human resource executive, and now with my current role as a client partner with Sterling Martin Associates, I cannot underscore the importance of a diversified workforce and the value different backgrounds and unique perspectives bring to the workplace. I think we all can agree DEI is at an inflection point today, and it gives me tremendous pleasure and honor to join 3 association executives who will share their approach to the next chapter of DEI in their organization. So as you see from the agenda, again, I think with all and each of our prior webinars, we are overly ambitious, but what we are going to cover this afternoon or morning, depending where you are viewing this from, is how to identify organization-specific DEI opportunity, efforts, and investments, establishing clear and quantitative goals, implementing KPIs and accountability, as well as troubleshooting DEI obstacles. So you see we have a lot to cover within the hour, and as Jessica stated, we encourage you to ask questions along the way, and if we are not able to get to your question, please contact us via the information at the end of this presentation. So I'd like to begin with our panel briefly introducing themselves. And let's begin with Amy Pitter. So I'll hand over to you, Amy.
Thanks so much, Damaris. And you just about said everything I want to say in my introduction. I'm Amy Pitter, and I am currently the President and CEO of the Massachusetts Society of CPAs. I've been there for 8-9 years, and before that, I was Commissioner of Revenue here in Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. And Anna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Polyak. I'm the CEO of Society of Surgical Oncology. I've been here for about a year, but I do come from another association where I spent past 11 years. And then my previous background in my past life is nursing and healthcare law. And I'm very excited to be part of this program. This is such an important conversation.
Thank you. And Vani.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vani Ungapin. I am the Executive Director for the American Association of Law Libraries, and we go by AALL. And before that, I spent about 15 years in the realtor world, realtor associations. So I'm excited to be here and to discuss this very important topic with all of you.
Great. Well, thank you each for your brief introduction. And Vani, I'd like to hand over the floor to you to begin with this discussion this afternoon. So please proceed with the work you have done with AALL.
Great. Thank you, Damaris. Well, with this part, I'm going to share with all of you some of the things that the association has been doing on the DEI, just efforts that we've been involved with many, many years. So about in the 1990s, the association saw the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also tying that with a pipeline in the profession. So they started this education scholarship fund that is still going strong 30 years later, giving out grants, scholarship and fellowship grants to underrepresented students going to library schools, going to law schools. So that's something that has really helped. We give out about 10 to 15 grants and scholarships every year. So I'm just going through a list of different things we've done. And in 2017, the executive board, and that predates me a little by a year, revised its annual meeting site selection policy. I'm hearing a lot of executive directors talking right now about the conferences being held in specific states and how members are not too happy or saying we should move, conferences to different states. So with AALL, one of the things we look at when we go to a state, a city for our annual meeting and conference is to look at the laws. Whether there are any discriminatory laws and does it impact the members? And when I mentioned the annual meeting site selection policy, there's a clause that we ask every conference center, every hotel to include in our agreements that if for any reason after, we sign contracts 5 years ahead of time, so to say if your laws change, we can get out of our agreement with a reduced penalty or no penalty. And I can say, and I mentioned this policy was put in place by the association in 2017. We've never had a conference center or hotel not included. We've never had to pull out and use that clause. So we've been very fortunate, but these, efforts show how the commitment has been there, not saying, there isn't much to be done. So now I'll cover a little bit more recent things that the association has been involved with. While I mentioned the efforts, in the 90s or in 2017, we realized about 2 years ago that the association did not have a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. And although it was one of the core values, but there wasn't really a policy to define what does it mean? What does diversity mean for law librarians, for the association? What does inclusion mean? What does equity mean? Because every organization defines it differently. It depends who your audience is, who are your members. So that was something that I'm really excited that the board approved last July. We have a brand new diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. And that policy serves as the foundation of any any new things that we come up, any new programs, we can pinpoint to this policy. And also, for the first time in the association's history, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the 5 goals in our new strat plan. So in our new 2022-2025 strategic plan, when you're 1. And so putting it in a strategic plan means the organization is intentional, will allocate resources, whether it's financial, staff time to it. And also we try to track progress. Every board meeting we're showing, we have color-coded progress, yellow, red, and green. But at least it shows a commitment that there are specific strategies for this goal, and we are measuring it, we're looking at it, we're intentional about it. And then finally, I'm going to mention, the discussion for law librarians when we talk about diversity is diversity in ethnicity, but diversity in library type. We have members in different library types. Diversity in gender. Law librarians are mostly females. So that's how we try when we're looking for diversity. We're bringing the folks that we don't see in our membership, we don't see in our education program. So as part of the strategic plan, mentioned the goals, but the strategies was when we do the call for program proposal for our annual meeting and conference, one of the questions that the program proposer has to answer is whether the program ties in with diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also to remind the program proposed, especially if they have a panel, to include a diversity of speakers. And when we say, what do you mean, what the diversity of speakers, experience, gender, library type. So it's great sometimes to get a newer law librarian, at least, and I'm speaking for the law librarianship, and with an experienced law librarian on a panel to get different perspectives. So these are things that we're implementing. Our members are getting used to it because that's a change of thinking. And at the headquarters staff level, one thing new that we are doing right now is when we send out RFPs, requests for proposals, we ask vendors, contractors, what are their diversity efforts? What are the things they're doing? That's something it's not required, but we do. And we have found that vendors are actually very excited to include the things that they've been doing. So these are a list, but I think it's great. It is a good start. There's still a lot. Every day I think of new things we can do, but I also realize we do have limited resources, and progress will be slow. We will see a difference every day. We see, folks are excited. Our membership is growing. We see members more excited to be involved with the association, our number of volunteers. So these are things that we are doing. So I'm going to stop here, Darius, if you have any questions or.
No, thank you for that, Bonnie. And again, I'm jotting down some common themes that I've heard that I probably will very likely share towards the end. But thank you very much for sharing what you have done to date. Also, what was in place prior to you joining and what you're envisioning for the future. So thank you again. Amy, I'd like to turn it over to you. And I must say, as someone who recently led the HR function for the global voice of the accountancy profession, I know firsthand and very much aware of the importance of DEI in accounting. So
Yeah, it's
intrigued
huge
to share and hear from you on what you have done with the Massachusetts Society of CPAs.
Great. Well, let's talk about it. So I do have a slide, which unfortunately I can't really see, but this slide basically shows kind of the funnel of when we lose diversity in the profession, starting in high school through college, through getting hired into a firm, through becoming a CPA, and through getting into leadership at a CPA firm or in a company as a financial professional. Just a couple of points before I go on about sort of the different inflection points. One is that this funnel is accounting specific, but the research shows that pretty much that this is the experience in many, if not all professions, that these are the inflection points where we tend to lose diverse professionals. The other comment I want to make on the slide is that, as Vani was saying, there's all kinds of diversity. This slide and much of the conversation we're going to have right now is about racial diversity. There are other lenses. We look at gender, we look at LGBTQI+. There are a bunch of diversity lenses, but the lens of underrepresented minorities and racial diversity is kind of what I'm focusing on. So it was interesting because we started talking about DEI, with increasing intensity just after I started, so call it 7 years ago. And everybody wanted a quick fix. It was almost like they wanted to take a pill to get them, get some diversity. And when you look at this slide, you realize there's no one size fits all. There's no quick fix. There's a pipeline issue and it goes throughout somebody's lifetime. So we think about what are the barriers and the inflection points and how do we lose people at every step along the pipeline, and what interventions can we do to make improvements at that inflection point. So thinking first about high school, and believe me, I'll be talking about middle school if we have this conversation again next year. But thinking about high school, we think about awareness and we think about messaging. And specifically, some of the research we've seen is that the messages that resonate with underrepresented minorities are slightly different. A lot of students in high schools from more diverse students don't feel like they have the skills. So one of the things that we think is important to message is, hey, accounting's not about math. You do have the skills. It doesn't matter if you don't know calculus, you're good, The other is that it's a chance to help the community. That really resonates, that you can be a leader in your community and help leaders in your community with an accounting degree. One of the ways we message accounting to the pipeline in general is, it's counter-cyclical. It's a great job to have during the recession. The hiring rate out of almost all schools is 100%. That oddly is not as strong a message in the diverse community. It still matters, but it's not as strong. Whereas entrepreneurship and a pathway to tech jobs, those are the strong messages. So what tools do we use to start getting high school students to think about accounting as a profession? One thing we've just started doing in the last couple of years, which is super cool, is we're doing early college programs. So we're getting into the high schools with free 12-credit courses, so they're fully transferable to colleges. So, it reduces some of the financial burden in addition to creating some awareness. We do videos, we have conferences, we send CPAs to the classroom. And one tool that we're starting to recognize the importance of more is social media. Traditionally, the reason people have gotten into accounting, or the way they've gotten into accounting, is through first-degree relationships. Their mom's an accountant, their dad, their neighbor, and in underrepresented minorities, there aren't as many of those first-degree relationships with accountants. So what research is showing is that social media can actually substitute for those first-degree relationships in terms of awareness and understanding. So high school, awareness and messaging. Then you move into college, and as most of you know, by the time people are graduating from high school, entering college, they've chosen their major, right? So the awareness and messaging isn't as important. What is important is support and mentoring. Again, getting back to the first-degree relationships, a lot of people who come in with their moms, dads, uncles, aunts, as accountants, are also being mentored. If you don't have those first-degree relationships, that mentoring becomes super important to help you succeed. So So mentoring costs are a huge factor. Cases some of you haven't heard, college has gotten really expensive. So what tools do we use? We have a big scholarship program, and it's been really successful. We've doubled in size in the last few years. Our members just fund scholarships, and last year I think we gave out about $170,000 in scholarships. And what we find is $5,000 can make the difference. You know, it's not 20 grand, it's 5 that can make the difference between somebody being able to stay in college and not. And the other thing we've been doing is some formalized mentorship programs. And we've been tying the two together, saying, you know, here's $5,000, you now have a scholarship from Mass CPAs, and you're also now a mentee in our mentorship program, because we really want to help you succeed in a bunch of different ways. So the next place people drop off is there, and it's a funny gap, is between enrolled accounting students and new hires. And there's a really surprising gap. And to be honest, we don't understand exactly what all the fall off is there, but we think part of it is the schools that firms traditionally go to are not schools that have large minority student bodies. So we're really encouraging firms who really do want more diversity. It's like, well, if you go where you always went, you're going to get who you always got. So look at, you know, state universities, state colleges. We don't have HBCUs in Massachusetts, but there are large diverse populations more in the state system than in the private school system. So people are trying to understand that and trying to build relationships with the career centers in those non-traditional venues for recruiting for accounting schools. Then it's becoming a CPA. Look, I know you guys aren't accountants, but it's hard to become a CPA. You have to, you know, you need 150 hours of credit. So that's like a 5th year, one way or another. You need to study for, pay for, and take a long, hard test. And that's probably one of the biggest places you lose really motivated and wonderful students, is they don't have the time, money, or space to study for it, sit for, pay for the exam. So lots of work there. You know, a lot of it is just financial support, but we're also working with the accounting profession, because right now you have to take your CPA exam in 18 months. It's 4 parts. So between the time you pass your first exam and pass your 4th exam, you can have no more than 18 months. Well, if you have a complicated life, you know, if you have financial pressures, families, if you don't look like, you know, the traditional CPA from 20 years ago, that 18 months can be very hard to achieve. So we're working with the accounting profession to say, well, what's magical about 18 months? Can we expand that? And then finally, we've gotten somebody into the pipeline, through the pipeline, into the profession, and there's still barriers. I mean, right now, we have less than a third of non-white, Hispanic, Latino, female, LGBTQIA respondents to a particular survey that was done nationally. Less than a third of that group viewed that their particular demographic received equitable treatment, has, you know, equal access, the information support they need. So we lose people at a terrific rate after they've entered the profession for reasons of equity. So what do you do? So it's a couple of things. One is to have leaders within the profession understand the business case, right? You're not doing this to be nice, you're doing this to be successful. And I think that message is starting to permeate. But other than that, we find that, you know, one of our biggest tools is really training. We do extensive training of firm leaders, because what we see is the tone has to be set at the top. The firm leaders really have to believe in DEI as a strategic initiative, but you can't just train at the top. You have to train everybody in an organization to really see a change, and it's a change that the profession wants and needs. So maybe worth the investment as people kind of think, gee, what should be on the front burner? Shouldn't it be making money? Well, this needs to be in the front burner too. So that's where we've been and what we've been working on.
Amy, going back to tracking and how you got these numbers, a good question came in regarding the tracking of member demographics. How does your association collect this information?
So most of the research that I've been citing is national research done by either the Institute of Management Accountants, the IMA, or the CAQ, Center for Audit Quality. So they've got, they're pretty well resourced and do this national surveys. At an individual, our Massachusetts society level, we track through surveys, through questionnaires, that sort of thing. I don't think we're at a point where we feel like our individual results are super right, because we ask people when they register to talk about, how they define themselves in terms of ethnicity, race. Some do, some don't. So the tracking at that level is pretty hard. I think the national level is better.
Thank you, Amy. And Bonnie, actually going back to your discussion about like the conference center locations, a good question came in. I love the idea to consider conference locations and a state's diversity scorecard. How do you build up a backup plan given the difficulty to reschedule?
Yes, and I had mentioned we've been very fortunate. We've never had to use that clause. That is a great question. And I think what we have going on our side is even the states we go to right now are states that are very open, no discriminatory laws. So the likelihood of those states changing cities, enacting laws and legislation would be very, very small. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer of what the backup plan would be because we've never had to use it. And we've been going to cities and states that I would be very, very surprised if I see such laws and we had to back out of such contracts.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, anything else, Jessica, before we have Anna share her experiences?
Well, Amy, you did share a lot of the programs that you've come up with to target, early education, and which I myself appreciate with, young kids in high school. But do you, let's see, do any of you use college or early graduate internships or fellowships to help increase hopeful access to diverse candidates who might convert later to an FTE?
Yeah, so these early college programs that we have a career connectedness component of them. So we work with our member firms to offer those, I guess you'd call them internship opportunities. So we offer those connected to the early college programs. And we're looking at other ways. I mentioned about the 150 hours, some ways that a portion of that 150 hours could be met through something like an internship, but stay tuned on that one.
Thank you. Damaris, I'll let you go ahead and move forward.
All righty, thank you. And Anna, let's hand it over to you now on the work that you have done since assuming the role at the Society of Surgical Oncology.
Thank you, Damaris. I've been taking notes here while my co-panelists have been talking. They're not an easy act to follow, but a lot of good notes because I am relatively new with an organization and I've been here for about a year. And we're actually right at the beginning of implementing our new strategic plan. When I joined the organization, we were in the very early phases of planning of the new strategic plan. We undertook a 6-month-long process to do strategic planning. We involved over 200 members in the process. We conducted surveys, in-depth interviews. We had task forces and focus groups, really to design the roadmap for the next 4 years for our organization. And we ended up with 4 pillars, each of the pillars having a DEI component, really as a top goal. And that was very intentional and really unanimous by leadership of the association. So this was really a member-driven strategic plan with a large DEI focus. And each goal, has several objectives with tactics that will be implemented through a variety of projects over the next 4 years. And as you can see, many of them will have a strong DEI focus. While we had over 200 members involved in the creation of the strategic plan, and we were very transparent through the process and made sure that voices from all sectors of our membership were represented, we knew that there would be a larger lift, a larger organizational commitment that would be needed to bring it to the entire membership. So our approach was to roll it out at the annual meeting, which just happened this past March in Boston. And we made the rollout of the strategic plan and the DEI focus of the plan a large component of our annual meeting. Our president sent her presidential address around the strategic plan. We shared it with our attendees, our corporate partners, our sponsors, and it was a really very well received. They were very appreciative of us being transparent and telling them this is our plan. And out of that came up many good conversations and actually opportunities for collaboration. I was actually very pleased to see that our industry partners were very interested in our DEI focus. And as a follow-up to our annual meeting, we'll be having many conversations to see, where we can collaborate and bring some of those projects to fruition. And obviously, as an association, we're always looking for opportunities to industry help sponsor some of our initiatives. So I think that was very successful on our end. We didn't plan it that way, but it was interesting because it was our industry partners coming and saying, we heard that this is going to be your focus. We would love to participate. So that was very, very successful. Because we are a healthcare association, I view implementation of our strategic plan and our DEI focus kind of in 3 different buckets, as you want to say. First, obviously, is implementing DEI through the association, making sure that we champion diversity, equity, and inclusion through SSO. The second component is really promoting health equity in cancer care to the patients that we serve. As I'm sure all of you know, there are a lot of inequities in delivery of healthcare in the United States, as well as across the globe. And as an organization that wants to be DEI focused, we want to help to bridge some of those disparities. And the third component is really how do we implement DEI internally as an association, with staff and us as an organization. So I'll kind of give you some example and thoughts about each one of these. Again, we're very early on in the process. But as we look at campaigning DEI through the association, we're obviously going to be looking at our internal infrastructure, the pipeline of surgeons. I think, Amy, you talked about that a little bit. We want to make sure that the surgeons who provide cancer surgery are as diverse as the population that they serve. And we realize that it's not the case right now. Obviously, as Amy indicated, there may not be as many opportunities in some of the communities to attend medical school, to go to college. So as an organization, we're going to be focusing on that. And really, we want to put some resources behind increasing support and engagement of diverse students and trainees and cancer providers. So that will be one of the focus that our organization will be doing. So we want to make sure there's a pipeline of underrepresented groups. We will also be looking at our internal structure. We're looking right now at our committee structure, at our leadership structure, and making sure that it's diverse. We have over 400 members serving on committees, and we're just starting to track the DEI component of it, making sure that we have great representation. As a matter of fact, when our leadership selected the 200 members that were involved in the strategic planning, it was very intentional to assure that there was broad representation of diversity. One of the other things we will be focusing on as an organization is engaging organizations representing DEI affinity groups. We want to be very intentional about that. We want to have those conversations, and they're especially important in healthcare. So we will be collaborating with some of the groups and organizations that are diverse, represent either diverse surgeons, diverse providers, or represent diverse patient groups. We want to be meaningful in engagement with some of the patient advocacy groups, and that goes to helping to bridge the inequities in delivery of healthcare. We want to create patient education. We want to design and implement patient education and make sure that that's being disseminated among some of the underrepresented groups. We're also going to be focusing on recruitment of diverse populations in clinical trials. Many of our surgeons lead clinical trials, but what we've seen is there's really not a very good representation of diverse populations. So we will be putting some intentional effort behind that and making sure we help to bridge those disparities. In the next few years, well, again, what we're trying to do is start small and make sure that we measure it along the way. We have 4 years ahead of us, but hopefully, as with any good strategic plan, you change your tactics, you change your objectives, but your goals will remain the same. So hopefully this DI focus will continue beyond the 4-year term. But again, our idea is to measure it, make sure that we're effective and we're making a difference. The last component of DI implementation, as I see it, is really looking at us as an association. We're a relatively small association. We're just under 20 staff. And we want to make sure that we are diverse and we're able to support our diverse membership as well as the diverse population that they serve. So when I started here at SSO, my colleagues were very open to having that conversation. We started having lunch and learn. Sometimes we'll watch a webinar. This past holiday season, we actually had as part of our holiday party, we had a speaker who came in and talked to us about dwarfism, something many of us didn't know a lot about, but now we do. So we're making sure we implement that as part of our everyday conversation. During the interview process, we've had many of our candidates recently ask us about our DI focus, and it was nice for us to say that, this is something that's a focus of this organization. This is something that we're planning to do as part of our strategic plan, but also internally, as an organization. And I really do feel that it helped us to attract better candidates, because with the environment today, people are very open about this conversation and they're very, very excited about it. In my role as a CEO, I look for diversity in staff because I really think it helps us to be a stronger, more effective organization. Amy, you mentioned high school, and I remember this story. I once worked for a very effective leader, and we kind of joked internally that he surrounded himself by people who he wouldn't be friends with in high school. And as I progressed in my leadership career, I realized that that's the point. If you want to be an effective leader, you have to surround yourself by people who probably wouldn't be at your high school lunch table, because that allows for diversity of perspective, diversity of opinions, and will make you a better leader and your organization stronger. So, like I said, we're very early on in our process, but a lot to do. I've been taking notes to see what my colleagues are doing, and I think this is such an important and exciting conversation.
Well, thank you for that, Anna. And I think you've shared, and kudos to you and your organization, not only in a very visual commitment and intention with DEI, and where you are and what you've done. I think what I'd like to do with each of the panel, I have some questions, and recognizing you each are at various stages with your DEI efforts and initiatives, I will kind of put the question out there and ask one of you, perhaps all of you, to chime in here. But again, I'm recognizing different tenure with your current organizations, but what would you say was the driver for this refocus on DEI with your organization? What transpired? What was the trigger for you to begin implementing, assessing your programs today?
Sure. So I'll start. And a lot of it goes to what Anna was saying about professionals should look like the people they are serving. So I think that's clearly one driver in the accounting profession, is changing workforce, a changing marketplace, a tradition of not being diverse, combined with just a huge staffing shortage. I mean, there are not enough people going on. And if you sit back and realize that you're not attracting, some 40% of the workforce, that's not good. And retention is a huge problem in the profession, again, because there's so much more work than people now. So if you're losing people because they're not feel like they're being treated equitably, you've got a problem. So I think that's what's kind of driving the profession to start embracing DEI. For me personally, it's a passion. It's a passion for many, many years. So I brought that anyway. And then, but the profession writ large is really starting to embrace DEI for all the business case reasons and all the staffing reasons that I think many people are.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I would
Anna,
love- Oh, sorry. I would love to
Bonnie, yes, I was going to say, do you want to comment on that question?
Yes, I was going, I think Anna mentioned it for AALL, it was a lot of the discussion started with a pipeline as we were looking at the demographics of our members and thinking about the future, the next generation of law librarians. How do we bring them in? How do we bring them in the profession? And I would say the other driver for the association to adopt the new D&I policy to be intentional about putting D&I as one of its strategic goal was the Black Lives Matter movement that, 2-3 years ago. That really, I think, for the board, for the association, really took a step back. And there were many discussions, many of them were uncomfortable things that usually we wouldn't talk as a board. And I loved it. I enjoyed that because that means we were in a safe space and it was okay to have those difficult conversations. So I would say those were the drivers, at least for AALL.
Okay. And Anna, anything you want to comment there that has not been said?
No, for us as well, it was member driven. I was very fortunate to come into the organization that was ready for this. It really truly was a member driven strategic plan, and the DI focus was member driven. But I really want to pick up on what Bonnie just said. It used to be an uncomfortable conversation. Now it's a must-have conversation, and it's really good to see that within organizations. Where even 2 to 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it was an uncomfortable conversation. Now it's a must-have, and it's really good to see that progress.
Okay. Jessica, before I go into any questions, anything else has come in? I have a few, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, we do have one that came in, a follow-up question for those who have scholarships. What language do you use in your application process? Are scholarships specific to students from HBCUs, or do you encourage applicants from a diverse population with a focus on selecting students who identify as diverse?
I'll take that. It's the second part. We market the scholarship application to every student, and we use the federal government definition to make it easy and simple, and we link to it. Whoever asked the question, I'm happy to send a link to our application process to see how we word it.
Okay, I'll make note of the person who asked it and send it to you.
Great, thank you.
It was a great question.
So we have a couple of ways that we try to make our scholarships attractive to diverse students and have them go to diverse students. One is that we send scholarship applications specifically to folks who are involved in our high school programs. And our high school programs are very targeted to low income and underrepresented minorities. So that works. We don't have HBCUs in Massachusetts. We do have a very robust state system that's more diverse than the private system. And we have good contacts there it's really the schools who need to promote these scholarships to their students. So we work with the leadership and faculty at colleges and universities to make sure that they're promoting our scholarships at state schools.
Great. And one thing I'm very pleased personally to hear from each of you in this discussion today, that DEI has become part of your strategic plan. Some of you have DEI. I think, Anna, you shared it's on the agenda, which is a great move. I don't believe before 2020 if that in fact was the case. And again, kudos for you for sharing that information with us. With the different stages that you are with your initiatives and programs, have you seen any incremental change with your measurement or KPIs? If so, what have you seen? And again, I know it varies with each organization and each program. But if you could talk a bit about that.
Sure. So we think about kind of lead indicators and lag indicators, and we think about, we can measure how many people come to our trainings and how many student interactions we're having, and, or a lot of diverse students showing up for our high school programs and so forth. But those are all lead indicators, right? Like, are we increasing the amount of activities we're having, and are people showing up for them? So we can measure that. But measuring the outcome is much harder, and because we're not talking about something that happens in months, we're talking about something that happens in years, if not decades. And I'll quickly tell you a story, which is that the number of women partners in Massachusetts, well, actually nationwide, has been about 20% for decades. And it's so frustrating because enrollments have been at parity for decades. Every big firm has, huge women's initiatives, medium firms do, state societies all have, women's programs and everything else, and yet 20% was there year after year. This year, according to the supply and demand report, there are now 39% of partners are women. So, but it's been decades. So I feel like you have to have some faith that if you do enough of the right stuff, eventually it'll pay off. So we measure, are we doing enough of the right stuff, but not really measuring yet the outcomes because they're so slow to move.
And with accountability, where does it lie in each of your organizations with these programs?
With everyone.
Okay.
I mentioned the strat plan. I do think there are things that when I say we, the staff, we do rely on the board, right, to create the policies. And then the board is trusting us, the staff, to implement those policies, to come back with KPIs. So, and also we need the members buy-in, right? Everybody to be on board. So I would say it is everybody. It's not the same responsibility, but we all in it. It's a collaborative effort. And it's okay to have, like I mentioned, those conversations. So it's with the board, it's with their staff, it's with the general membership, it's with the committee members, committee chairs. So it has to be to see the difference, to make an impact. Cannot be just 5 people thinking it's important and the rest don't.
Absolutely. And I do believe that there is a lot to learn from mistakes. Can you share any of your experiences with the audience that you wish you knew beforehand as you were implementing or leading any of your programs or initiatives?
And let me add to that too. A question just came in, which is a good add-on for that question, Damaris. Okay. Did you have resistance among other staff or membership to implement your DEI plans? If so, how did you address this?
I can start, and I'm not necessarily answering the question, Jessica, but here's a thought. I think you'll always have resistance. You'll always have some people who may not be aligned with it or not think it's a priority. And I think it's not necessarily a mistake, but was really surprised when I came to SSO that DEI has become a comfortable conversation. And I think if we as leaders and support our elected leaders in our association, as well as our colleagues, in treating DEI as a comfortable conversation, I think that's half of the workload. I think for so many years, it was truly an elephant in the room and an uncomfortable conversation. But if we treat it as part of our culture and kind of, I think as Vani said, slowly but surely incorporate it in everything we do, eventually it will become part of our organizational culture, but it will take time. I think, Amy, you said that too. It will take time, but I think continuing to do it will make it part of our infrastructure and trickle down to everything that our association does on a day-to-day basis, and how we support our members and, you know, patients or customers that they serve in return.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of good lessons learned, I think. You know, we do a lot of training for firms. And one thing we recognize is just what you were saying, Damaris, people are all over the place. So we realized how customized our trainings needed to be, because some people haven't heard the term unconscious bias, and other people have seen the slides 3 times and, you know, need something completely different. So that's been huge to be able to customize those trainings. I guess the other thing is, you know, the leadership in the profession is still white men. You know, it's changing. You know, there are 39% of the partners are women now, but we realize that we really need these white men to be allies. You can't write them off, and sometimes you can't judge a book by its cover. I mean, some of our best leaders and influencers have been these older white CPAs, and they've been fabulous. So, you know, recognizing that you need this kind of allyship and training in allyship has been huge. And just Jessica, to your point about resistance, yes, we have had resistance. We've gotten some nasty emails, you know, after I've done a diversity message in my weekly newsletter or something, somebody will write back and, you know, or we do our women's leadership and somebody will write back and say, well, when's the men's leadership conference? And, you know, so yes. And in general, I would say the profession is in 2 places. There's definitely people who are in the absolute forefront of DEI, and there are some who are really lagging behind. And, you know, the way we do it is we just keep talking about it, and we keep training, and we keep trying to show leadership, you know, because sometimes you just have to keep leading, and eventually people will follow. And I think that's our strategy.
Okay.
And I'm going to add lesson learned. I have realized over the past few years that not everybody have the same meaning for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now starting the conversation of what we mean before even going into the tactics, the strategies. So that's something I learned, you know, later. And also understanding that change is going to take time, and don't give up. Don't feel like, okay, I'm going to stop. I've tried this 20 times, you know, nothing, I'm not seeing the needle move at all. Just keep going, and it'll take time, but we'll see the impact.
Absolutely. And I think one thing, and you've all touched on it, and most recently you, Vani, diversity takes all forms. It's no longer race or gender. It's all encompassing. You know, April is Autism Awareness Month. Autism is a neurodiversity. There are organizations that proactively, as each of you are very intentional on targeting that pipeline from the initial application stage and once on board with the proper mentoring. And I think for any organization, it's important to be very inclusive, from understanding proper gender pronouns. Vani, I believe it was you who may have shared in one of our earlier conversations, if not correct me, but something that we may have taken for granted when you go to a conference, having a gender neutral restroom. And if it's not already on that restroom door, was it you, Vani, who shared that?
It was me.
Having someone have that immediate kind of, let's put it over the restrooms, that there is that access for everyone. And they are very small details, but you know, I view diversity, and this is not I wish I don't own this brand, but I thought the best description is diversity, equity, inclusion, but also belonging, right? So just having people come and represent it, but do they truly feel like they belong at the table at that organization? And, I think one thing I've heard as I took my notes before we end in time that was very consistent from each of you, and I think what we've each learned, there is intentional. I've heard it many times from you, your approach and the work you've done, intentional with all action, the commitment to see it through, patience, and pipeline, recognizing can't continue to go to the same well to source talent. You have to broaden perspective. And, Amy, to your sharing, there are a slew of universities, community colleges that have great talent. Are we doing enough to target that pipeline and providing the resources to continue to build? And lastly, as someone in the executive search side today, it's important when you engage either with your internal recruiting team or an external recruiter, ask what worked, how do they approach and target diverse candidates? We no longer accept responses that are one sentence, I'm committed to diversity. We're probing a bit more. What have you done? What have you led and why? And, I think I've heard that from each of you on that importance. Any last words, unless there are questions coming in, Jessica?
Let's try to answer one more that came in. Has anyone explored social offset as a way to support underserved groups and communities as an alternative to navigating restrictive laws and policies in different states? All right.
And perhaps we're not understanding the question exactly.
Yeah, maybe the person can share a
Send
little additional information if
Yes.
possible. Are you finding utilities with employee resource groups to aid in the DEI engagement or move forward of DEI related ideas?
Yeah, so I would say some of the larger accounting firms have ERGs. We have toyed with the idea of trying to do a statewide ERG for folks who are not in the big firms. But I mean, I'm embarrassed to say at this moment, we don't have the critical mass to try to get a statewide ERG. But I think the large firms where there is critical mass use them and find them to be very effective. And fingers crossed, maybe one day we'll have an ability to set up a statewide ERG.
Okay. Anything else, Jessica, before?
Let me see. No, I don't think so. I think we are good to go because we are running out of time.
Okay, and we have 3 minutes. Any closing remarks any of you would like to make before we close out this webinar?
Just wanted to say thank you, and I hope this topic, we keep talking about it, we keep sharing ideas, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for everybody who attended.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
All right, and like we said, if we did not get to one of your questions, or if you wanted to contact any of us via email, please feel free to use our email addresses here. Also, but thank you. Yes, thank you again for attending. Thank you, you wonderful panelist group. It was great working with you on this. And everyone, please feel free to join us. More information will be sent out about our next webinar hosted by Sterling Martin Associates, to be held on May 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The title of this session is Leading for High Performance in a Virtual Setting. Please remember that this session is also eligible for 1 CAE credit hour. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Okay, thank you,
Have a
Jessica.
wonderful
everyone.
afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.